Okay, good morning. So before we get to the Gemara, just talk a little bit about the significance of today, briefly. So today, of course, is Purim Katan, the minor Purim, right? It's the 14th of the first Adar. So considering that we view the second Adar as primary, we celebrate Purim properly in the second Adar. However, we still have a first Adar, even if it's not the primary. And therefore, we celebrate, at least to some degree, the Purim in the first month, which would be today. And even though there's no official observance, the line at the end of the section of the Shulchan Aruch, the four sections of the Shulchan Aruch, the first section deals with the daily routine and year cycle of the Jew. So it has it goes to the laws of the daily routine, then it goes to the laws of the week, Shabbos, and then it goes to the laws of the calendar. Right? It's the laws of routine. So the last laws are the laws of the minor Purim, right? Because the beginning of the year is Nisan, so it starts with Pesach, and then the last laws will be Purim. And then within Purim, the last laws is the laws of the minor Purim, Purim Katan. And there, the Ramos quotes the verse which reads, V'toiv leiv mishtatamid, saying even though there's no official celebration in the minor Purim, but it's a quote from the verse, Toiv leiv mishtatamid, the good heart is always feasting. As if to say,
good heart
is always feasting, something like that. Toiv leiv mishtatamid. That is to say, when the person goes through Oirach Chaim, when the person goes through his daily routine, it's got to have a sense of joy and a sense of open-heartedness and a sense of contentment, not tight. The good heart is constantly feasting, is always in a good mood, he's always happy and smiling and so on. So, yeah. So if you check out some of our classes on Purim Katan on YouTube, both from my father and myself, you'll hear more elaboration on this notion of the message of Purim Katan, in that this idea of joy and happiness and contentment in the ordinary day. And that's kind of what Purim Katan is. So it's not a major holiday. Even on an ordinary day, it should be invested with a sense of joy. This is Purim Katan. So what I want to share with you is something specific to us as Chassidim of the Rebbe. The Rabbi mentioned this on Shabbos and Shul, that 30 years ago today, the Rebbe distributed a booklet with a discourse. So just to give some context, the Rebbe in general,
with some honey cake.
Yeah, the Rebbe in general made himself available to all Jews in a manner that I don't think any leader in Jewish history ever did. And right from the start, responding to every single letter personally and himself, opening every letter himself that was ever sent to him in the thousands. There's something like 34 volumes currently of his letters, and they're not even halfway through his tenure as Rebbe. They're about halfway through, talking about huge amounts. In early years, they were spent nights, a few nights a week, up all night, personally talking to individuals on a private level, not like big world leaders, everybody, big world leaders and individuals dealing with trying to resolve a conflict between husband and wife, trying to marry off their children, whatever the issues are, or a simple boy in yeshiva struggling to learn. I mean, everybody. And then especially in the later years, as the Rebbe cut back on the private audiences because it was too overwhelming, the dollar distribution. The Rebbe stood for hours every Sunday and made himself available to talk to every single human that wanted to greet him. This is making himself available on a personal level. I really don't think there existed in history a leader who made himself personally available to everybody on that level.
Almost sounds like Moshe Rabbeinu in the desert.
Yeah.
When he had thousands coming to him.
Yisro told Moshe Rabbeinu, you can't do that. You can't field everybody. You got to set up a system. But Rebbe did that. He made him. I mean, Rebbe also create a system sending shluchim all over the world. But Rebbe certainly made himself available to literally everybody and anybody who wanted, can engage with him on a face-to-face level, which is an incredible thing. And I thank God. These eyes merited to look at the Rebbe's eyes, and the Rebbe's eyes looked at these eyes. I didn't do anything to earn that, but this is I merited that.
Cherished.
And it's something Even I don't remember most of it, but it's a fact that I cherish. And I have the dollars that they gave me. Unfortunately, I don't have anymore. But I do have a book that Rebbe handed out. So I was saying this all for the context of Rebbe also would, when he would decide, distribute booklets or even a full
Did they
book,
give out coins for Hanukkah?
coins. They would give out all kinds of things at different occasions, and they would give out books sometimes. So I merited that in Yud Shvat 1990. I was there, and they would get handed out a green Tanya with a paperback cover, like a paper cover, not a hardcover. And I still have that Tanya, which of course I cherish very deeply. That Tanya ever gave me. Anyway, so in that context, everyone would distribute to whoever was willing to take booklets. So it had this effect. First of all, it's another time when people can access face-to-face time with the Rebbe, even if they're not asking any questions, just to look at the tzaddik and to be seen by the tzaddik, to be seen by the Rebbe and look at the Rebbe. And it would also, of course, encourage those who receive that book to read it, to learn it with more excitement and more enthusiasm because you got it from the Rebbe's hand, right? If you see the old unedited footage of 770 after the Rebbe was done distributing whatever booklet, you see the crowd sitting down just to open the booklet and start reading. The Rebbe just gave it out. We got to learn it, right? So the Rebbe did this on a number of occasions, gave out books and booklets and so on. But for the most part, the Rebbe would give out books or booklets authored and written by previous Chabad Rebbes, by his predecessors. On few occasions, the Rebbe distributed his own work. There were a few times, but that was the outlier. For the most part, at Tanya, I believe the Rebbe gave out 3 times, maybe even 4 times. The Rebbe gave out a Tanya, other books, other works from previous Chabad Rebbes that had distributed. But his own work was a rarity, a little bit. Now, the last time the Rebbe ever distributed a book at all was 30 years ago today. Purim Katan, 1992, Tafshin and Beis. So Purim Katan today is the 14th of the first Adar. 2 weeks later, on the 27th of the first Adar, the Rebbe suffered a stroke. And since then, we haven't merited yet to hear the Rebbe's voice in the same way and see the Rebbe in the same way.
It was 27.
Yeah, so it's 2 weeks later. So the last book that the Rebbe distributed was his own discourse. And as Robert mentioned, the Rabbi spoke about this. The Rebbe included it in the little, it was like a little slipcase in which there was the booklet with that discourse of his, and then $1 for charity and honey cake. For whatever reason, they would give out like wrapped honey cake attached to the little package. For whatever reason, even though it's not Yom Kippur, but not Hashanah Rabbah, which is ordinarily when honey cake is distributed, but they would distributed honey cake.
It's like a survival kit.
So obviously there's something going on here, and this is so in many ways, Chassidim treat this discourse as there was marching orders. The last thing they ever distributed with his hand. This is the last discourse they ever edited, published, and then distributed with his own hand to something like 8,000-9,000 people. So it's very much cherished by Chassidim and learned and relearned and rediscovered and viewed in many ways as there was marching orders for the generation going forward. So last night, a number of us friends, we got together and we learned this discourse together again. And obviously we all had learned it before, but we learned it again and then bragged about it, talked about it, and so on. So because that's today, I'll just share with you a little insight into this mimer. So it's a rather relative to the Rebbe's discourses. This is somewhat longer than usual. Previous Chabad Rebbes have much longer discourses. The Rebbe's discourses were usually not that long, but this one is a relatively longer discourse. Well, I think someone's in the office, Robert. I think.
Why didn't he follow the lines of what the
Someone's come upstairs to the office. Someone's
Come
there.
up to the office.
why didn't he follow the directions or the of Yisrael? Why didn't he think of that?
Well, in some ways he did because he made shluchim, right?
Yeah, but it didn't help him.
Sorry?
Didn't help him in his work.
well, it helped him in the sense that he did field a lot of the work to the shluchim, but he just took on new work. We were just talking about this at the Farbrengen last night. It was very, very difficult, just physically very difficult to keep up with the Rebbe in those days.
What sense? You mean?
In the sense that the amount the Rebbe gave out on an ordinary week, the Rebbe spoke for 3 hours on Shabbos. So if you're out of town, right, you want to get a copy, a transcript of all that stuff. So that means there's people who are sitting there writing 3 hours worth of content down and faxing it and sending it all over the world so people can study it. I remember my father,
How soon after the speech was it ready?
within a few days. Now, in addition to that, the Rebbe had published an edited talk, an in-depth edited Likutei Sichos, an edited talk that were edited by a separate board of editors. They collected some essay the Rebbe had delivered years earlier. The Rebbe published it, we edited it, and it's basically like an in-depth Talmudic dissertation, say, or a dissertation on Rambam, Maimonides, or something. Now you got to study that too, right? In addition to that, the Rebbe published a Chassidic discourse, in-depth philosophical Chassidic discourse. You got to study that. It's all in 1 week. And then 3 times during the week, they ever decided that between Mincha Ma'ariv or after Ma'ariv, he's going to deliver a talk. You got to learn, you got to get to the hook up and listen to that too. And then plus your own regular learning. And then during one of those talks, they announced a new campaign. You got to get busy with that campaign too. Oh, and they was giving out a booklet. So you got to show up in 770, wherever you are, get that booklet. I mean, to keep up with the Rebbe is very, very demanding. You have to really be on top of your game. So even as the Rebbe fielded and delegated work to the shluchim and the people who worked with him, and his time freed up, the Rebbe just took on more work, which eventually meant he delegated more work to his people. Just content overload. It's 30 years later, and they're still publishing his works. They're still finished publishing everything. It's an inordinate amount of output from one human being. In addition to just, like I mentioned, being available, just standing there for hours, giving out dollars, talking to people, dealing with all kinds of issues and problems on world scale and personal scale. It's not a normal.
You have to learn in order to teach, right?
Yeah, we were just talking about, like, when did he have time to learn to prepare all these talks? A whole Tishrei. Shoshana, Yom Kippur, Sukkot, Simchat Torah, there was there in public, bringing, leading, encouraging the prayers, encouraging the song, giving discourses after discourse, and then comes Shabbos Bereshis, no relaxing time. There's a 3-hour bringing on Shabbos Bereshis with an in-depth discussion of Rashi, and then this and that. And sometimes between Simchat Torah and Shabbos Bereshis is 1 day. Sometimes no, but there's a whole bringing just for Shabbos Bereshis. And then by the time Shabbos Noach comes around, he's already published last week's talk with a discourse and a dissertation, and there's the Farbrengen of Harshas Noach. You better get on that too.
He edits those too, right?
Yeah, some of them, just in case you were exhausted from Tishrei. No. You're right into the grind of it. The output is inordinate. It's inordinate. At any rate, so just a small insight. One of the points that it makes in this discourse that they were distributed, the last booklet that they were distributed as of today. The Rabbi talked a little bit about it on Shabbos. He shared one element and he shared another element. The Rabbi is speaking about layers of dedication to the observance of Torah and mitzvahs. What we would call Mesiras Nefesh. Mesiras Nefesh, which literally means, it's often translated as self-sacrifice, but literally translated, Mesiras Nefesh means to give up oneself. Right? So in its most extreme version, giving up oneself means the person is willing to die for the sake of the cause. But giving up oneself doesn't necessarily have to mean the person is actually dying. I can give up myself while I'm living and breathing and say, this is what I live for, not just this is what I die for. And die for the cause is one version of Mesiras Nefesh, of self-sacrifice, of giving oneself, Mesir, like to give over, Nefesh, the self. Then there's another version of giving the self in which I live for this. Different type of version. So there identifies the following. When a Jew dedicates himself wholeheartedly to the service of Hashem, it can come in a number of forms. The first is the moment at Mount Sinai. That's when the first Jews said, Nasav and Nishma, we will do and we will hear. That's this dedication. Before we understand, before we figured it out, not in our terms. We're giving up the self for your service, for you, for what you want. Only afterwards, if we appreciate, don't appreciate, that comes second. What comes first is, what do you want? Right? So this is the first Mesiras Nefesh, the first dedicating oneself to the service of Hashem, is at Mount Sinai when the Jew says, yes, yes, sir, we will do as you wish, God. Understanding, appreciate comes next, but we're going to do what you ask. That's the first Mesiras Nefesh, the first devotion, the self-sacrifice. Now, what triggers this self-sacrifice at Mount Sinai? What triggers it? So the Gemara tells us that at Sinai, Kafa Aleim Har Kegigus, God held a mountain over their head and told the Jewish people, you accept the Torah, good. You don't, the mountain's coming down, and here's going to be the end. So it explains Chassidus that we should understand this beyond the literal mountain and literal burying, but understand this to mean that Hashem so overwhelmed the Jews with love that they couldn't respond to anything but yes, sir.
Just kind of like Esed Olam or one.
Something like that. Such great love, such overwhelming revelation of godliness that how could you say no? You just saw 10 plagues. You were just taken out of Egypt. You just saw the splitting of the sea with all the revelation that comes there. Now you're standing at Sinai, you hear God speak to you. What, you're going to say no now? With all that revelation, with all that love from Hashem, how could you possibly say no? You can't. So there's a dedication that happens here. There's a dedication that happens here. But this dedication is compelled by an external force, divine revelation. And therefore, we don't know yet how deep that dedication is. What about when there's no revelation? Are they still in? We don't know yet. Then comes the story of Purim. During the story of Purim, when the Jews are threatened with their lives, and they're still dedicated as Jews, now, kimu v'kiblu, the Jews re-accept or they reaffirm, they demonstrate the truth of their affirmation at the time of oppression of Haman. It's the first time the Jews are really oppressed. Till then, the Jews have enemies, but they're still living in the land of Israel until the story of Purim. They're living in the land of Israel. They have autonomy. They have a revelation of the temple. The first time Jews are in exile and are dealing with oppression in exile is in Purim, after the destruction of the first temple, during that 70-year period between the first and second temple, when Jews are in Persia. Leave it. Someone's off. When Jews are in Persia, and there's oppression from an external force. Okay, so no one's at, there you go. So no, someone answered. Yeah. So this is the first time the Jews are dealing with an enemy that's threatening them. There's no revelation, there's oppression. And they still stick to their Judaism. So now this is a clear dedication. This is the next level of dedication.
This is the
Story of Purim. The Jews are reaffirming that which they stated. They said at Mount Sinai, will do what you asked. But we're not sure if how deep that is. Because when they said that, they were overwhelmed by revelation. Comes to the story of Purim. There's no revelation. They're sitting in Persia. They're sitting in exile. There's oppression. And they still say we're dedicated. Oh, now this is real Mesiras Nefesh. This is real self-sacrifice. This is real devotion. Then the Rebbe says there's a third stage, a deeper stage. This is unbelievable. This is the most extremely empowering, especially in our generation. The Rebbe says like this: the Jewish people have a very, very strange nature. And the nature of the Jew is that when he's pushed against the wall, he more strongly affirms, I am Jewish. This is the nature of the Jew. We have this throughout our history. Oppression, many times, causes the Jew to be more connected to Judaism. Because you're threatening my Jewishness, I'm going to fight to the end. This is what happened to Jews in communist Russia. This is what the Rebbe speaks about there in this talk, in this discourse. Now, Jews in communist Russia, similar to the Jews under the oppression of Haman, they have an external force saying to them, you can't be Jewish. And the Jewish response is, no, I'm going to be Jewish anyway. So it's an extremely deep dedication. But says the Rebbe, at the end of the day, it's compelled by external stimuli. The oppression invokes within the Jew a response of greater dedication. So it still hasn't gone to the depth of the Jew freely choosing to serve Hashem. It's a response to the external stimuli. So, in other words, there are two external stimuli that can cause the Jew to dedicate himself to Hashem. One is the overwhelming love of Mount Sinai, the overwhelming revelation that causes the Jew to respond and say, yes, God, I'm dedicated. And then there's the oppression, the exact opposite effect, where the oppression pushes the Jew to the wall. The Jew says, I'm more dedicated to God because you're oppressing me, right? Like all the people who put on yarmulkes because Quebec said you can't wear a yarmulke.
I would have thought this would be level 2.
This is level 2, right?
No, it's level 3. 2 is the firm.
Right.
Level 3 is the Jew is oppressed.
Purim is the Jews being oppressed.
Oh, that's still part
It's
of
the same thing.
I thought
Whether
we
it's
were
Purim or
on-
Russia, it's the same thing. The point is it's Jews being oppressed and they fight back. Oppressed by Haman, oppressed by Stalin, oppressed by anybody else.
That's not a
It's the same, no, it's the same thing.
Oh,
Jew pushing back because he's being oppressed. I use this modern example of many people who put on kippahs simply because the Quebec government said you can't when you're working in the government, whatever the laws were. But see, because it triggers in a Jew that something. When a Jew is being pushed against the wall, it triggers in him this response in which he has to dedicate himself even more.
stimuli.
So it's external stimuli. Different type. One is revelation and one is oppression. So it's a very deep level. It requires an incredible amount of self-sacrifice, but it's still invoked by an external experience, by oppression. And then says the Rebbe, we come to the Jew living in America, living in the West, in which there's no one bothering him. Not if he is Jewish, not if he isn't Jewish. Do whatever you want, everything goes. You want to be spiritual, be spiritual. You want to be connected to Judaism, be connected to Judaism. You don't want to be, fine, you also don't have to be. There's zero external stimuli pushing the Jew in any direction. And in that kind of environment, a Jew says, I'm still dedicated to you. This is the ultimate self-sacrifice. This is the ultimate dedication of the Jew. The ultimate dedication. This is Rebbe's final message. Final is not a good word, but Rebbe's marching orders for a generation going forward. A dedication at the deepest level. I'm committed because I'm Jewish, not because someone else tells me I can't, and not because God, nothing.
This message wasn't for the
Because this is who I am. Because this is who I am. I'm a Jew and I'm dedicated, and that is it. Finished. Yes, pushing me, not pushing me, all irrelevant. This is what the Rebbe basically says there. If we take this a step further, the Rebbe doesn't say this in the talk there, but this is it seems we're trying to glean from this talk. When the Rebbe is here and the Rebbe is sharing his love with everybody, so in many ways, the dedication that Chassidim feel towards the Rebbe's mission, to a large degree, could become external stimuli. We talked about earlier, there was inspiration nonstop, the output. So in some ways, one might argue that the dedication that a chassid may have felt while the Rebbe was giving out dollars, and the Rebbe was responding with blessings and so on and so forth, be able to hear physically and see physically, there was blessing. It's kind of like a Mount Sinai kind of experience. There's an unbelievable revelation and you're swept up. But today, it's 30 years later. The Rebbe's not sweeping anybody off their feet. At least not in the physical sense as it was then. So where's the dedication coming from? Where's the dedication coming from? The Moshe Rabbeinu, the Rebbe has this ability to invoke within the Jew, within the Chassid, this is who I am, and this is what I'm dedicated to, beginning and end of story, that's it. Revelation available, revelation not available, oppression there, not oppression there, all irrelevant. When a person is connected to the Rebbe, they feel this sense, I am Jewish, this is what life is about, and this is what I'm dedicated to. Beginning and end of story. Saif pasuk, as the expression goes. That's the whole story. It's the whole story. This is the mission. This is who I am, and this is what I'm doing. Finished. It cannot be any other way. Not because somebody else is compelling me. There's no revelation, there's no oppression. You can check out, no one's going to bother you. Meaning you can decide to abandon the whole mission and no one's going to bother you. No one's going to come, there's no revelation going to show, and there's no one going to oppress you for it. Freely choose, because this is who I am, and that's this. Finished. This is the power of that unbelievably uplifting and yet demanding talk. This discourse that I ever gave out today, 30 years ago. So just sharing a little insight. It doesn't seem like we will continue our Gemara tomorrow, but this is quite powerful. We were talking about this when we were learning it last night. We were sharing how it's an interesting thing. The talk is very demanding. It's telling the reader that he has to self-impose upon himself a feeling of urgency, right? There's no oppression causing him to feel the urgency, and there's no revelation causing him to feel the urgency. But he imposes upon himself an urgency. No, this can't be this way. We can't leave the world as it is. We have to fight. We have to bling. We have to serve. We have to work. All self-imposed. So it's very, very demanding. And at the same time, it's unbelievably uplifting. It's unbelievably uplifting because this is who you are at the greatest depth. So it's a beautiful sort of almost paradox that the self-imposed urgency is the greatest sense of like confidence and joy, because this is who I am. I march forward, irrelevant of what is or isn't around me.
Maybe.
Yeah.
In all the past years, we've had the Baal Shem Tov, we've had the Alter Rebbe, the Middler Rebbe, the Tzedek, the Maharash, the Rashab, the Rayatz, and Schneerson, and now we have nothing. Now it's time for the Moshiach.
Now it's time for Moshiach, exactly. And now we have me and you.
We've always had somebody. Now
we have me.
It's time for me.
Now it's time for you and me. That's the point. It's time for me and you to feel the urgency. We have to feel the urgency. It's got to bother us that Moshiach's not here.
Imagine how busy we would have been, Michelle.
Yeah, Robert,
in our retirement.
And that's what's making us busy, because it's a wonderful busy. It's busy with being involved 24 hours a day, subconsciously, consciously, with all our intentions, with God's help, all our kavanah that we can bring out for the Eibishter with God's help.
It's funny you say consciously and subconsciously, because Deb actually mentions in that essay that Mesiras Nefesh, when a person decides to dedicate his life during oppression and say, that's it, I'm going to the end. You know, the guys in Russia who said, whatever it takes, I'm going to the gulag, I'm getting shot, too bad, I'm dedicated, right? In a way, it's a system override. There's a subconscious part of me that says, I have to dedicate myself. Whether I like it, don't like it, doesn't make a difference. It's a system override. But when it comes to the dedication, when there's no oppression, the dedication that we have in the West, it's not a system override. I got to appreciate it too. I can't like in Russia, system override, like super rational behavior. This is completely crazy to dedicate myself to the point of being sent to the gulags, but I'm doing it anyway because that's it, right? But in America, where you're free in the West, there's no system override. You live freely. You can think, you can read, you can develop your own ideas. But even as you do so, it's with that sense of the same urgency and same dedication. So it's the subconscious and the conscious. That's what Deborah discusses there. It has all the elements. It's the subconscious. That's it. I'm dedicated fully. But it's not a system override. It doesn't ignore my feelings. You got to develop your feelings too. You got to understand it also, even as you're dedicated to the end. Yeah. So it's interesting you mention that. Sorry, Robert, you want to say something?
I'm just trying to understand. I guess this last point about Jews living, this is the big task for the shluchim, for all the soldiers of the Rebbe, is to reach out to those Jews that are living in America and bring Judaism to their life on their own.
So if you
find it on their own, but
if a divine providence,
because the Rebbe's talks weren't really for for you guys, it was really for what you would do with that information to teach
To share
others.
others. Yeah. So if the divine providence brought you to this table, and the divine providence brought you to the Zoom, or the divine providence brought you to the YouTube recording of this, then it's because you also are that shliach in every way. So happens to be I get paid for it, then you're not paid for it. But it doesn't change the mission. Same, the responsibility we all carry is the same. If God brought you to this table, you're the Rebbe's shliach. That's how it is. And my father says the ultimate choice is not to choose to do this or to do that. The ultimate choice is to give up your choice. Because the reality is you're already in. Question of your resistance. So the choice is to let go of the resistance and to give up your choice and just embrace the fact that this is who you are. You're a shliach. You're here on the mission. You're integral to the mission, and dedicate yourself to the whole thing fully.
If we work on ourselves 24 hours a day, God works through us. It's a question of working on ourselves all the time. God will do all the rest, all the business things, all the various things that have to be done. But we have to work on ourselves 24 hours a day. That's the Eibishter. We're there.
Yeah.
You know, the three types of servants. The first servant who says, and I'll do whatever I'm asked. The second servant, what could he possibly want at this moment? And the third one is, he thinks of what would the person want with God's help, that before he even thinks he wants it. And with the Eibishter, of course, we know that it's always, we think of what more. And that's what the Rebbe was doing. What more, on a constant basis. And that's where his entire zeal, his entire enthusiasm, his entire kavanah, everything was dedicated to that in every way.
A deep sense of
to live like that, what a sense of matara, what a sense of purpose, what a sense of commitment, and a sense of that life is worth living every moment, because every moment is attached to the Eibishter, knowing that we have something that is so significant, meaningful, and that creates the devekut, that the connection, the link that we have directly, that we are one with the Eibishter.
Yeah. This I'll just conclude with this. Someone mentioned last night at this Farbrengen, this gathering, someone mentioned on that note, though, that there was a kid who was in a Chabad camp in 1990, 91, 92, somewhere there. And he's hearing that every mitzvah is bringing Moshiach closer and so on and so forth. And the kid goes home from camp and he's totally distraught. There's all these mitzvahs and Moshiach's still not here. So the director of camp wrote to the Rebbe, like how do we told them about this kid, and like how do we handle that? What should we do? What should we do with this child? So the Rebbe circled what the kid's concern, that we're doing all this mitzvahs and Mashiach's not here. And then wrote, this is my claim. This is my argument. I'm with the kid. I'm totally with him. I'm on the same page as the child. He's complaining with all his mitzvahs and Mashiach's not here. Exactly, me too. Here we are fighting, and every moment. Beautiful, like, then we took the child's side. Yeah, I'm with him. Why is it Moshiach here? But more and more and more and more, living with this sense of urgency. Okay, Yidden, we should take the inspiration of this day and
Levi.
Even a little bit more feel the responsibility, a little bit more feel the urgency. And with Hashem's help, we'll merit this ultimate revelation very soon.
Revelation to be gebenched. All the very best to you, Alan. All the very best to you, Yeshua. Have a wonderful day, everyone. With God's help, it's Purim Katan to bring us
Purim Katan.
Essence of the Simcha. All the very best to you.
Amen.
Good day.
You too.